The entire tennis universe is spiraling, deep in conspiracy theories about the sudden breakup of Carlos Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero. You look left, you look right, everybody claims they know the truth, but zero people actually have the receipts. Enter Marc López, the Olympic gold legend who steered Rafael Nadal through his most iconic chapters, dropping an interview that completely flipped the script for me. But before we tear into exactly what Lopez exposed, listen closely. If you live for courtside politics and want the raw truth about these high-stakes partnerships, do not click away from this video. What Lopez put on the table isn't your standard tabloid trash or empty guesswork. We are talking about a veteran who has lived in the trenches, sweating in the player's box during the most nerve-wracking match points in history. And his read on the Alcaraz-Ferrero divorce? It is absolutely mind-blowing. Picture the scene. It is December 17th, 2025, dead of the off-season. Everybody is chilling, recharging batteries for the tour, when suddenly bang, world number one Carlos Alcaraz detonates a nuclear bomb on his feed. He is cutting ties with Juan Carlos Ferrero, the mentor who has stood by his side since he was just a 15-year-old kid. The architect behind 6 Grand Slams, 8 Masters, 1,000 trophies, and the historic run as the youngest king of the ATP, gone. 7 years of a seemingly flawless dynasty, wiped out in an instant. The sport went into total hysteria. Twitter, Instagram, every obscure message board, the fans were losing their minds. Was it a cash grab? Was it bad blood? Did Papa Alcaraz shove Ferrero out the exit door? Or was it a clash over how to train? Did the whole Mi Camino documentary vibe clash with Ferrero's old-school iron-fisted discipline? Speculation was spreading like wildfire, and honestly, we were all flying blind. That is exactly when Marc López steps into the ring. This is not some armchair expert shouting into the void. This man snatched Olympic gold in doubles alongside Rafa Nadal back in Rio, 2016. He guided Nadal from 2021 until the very end, locking down Rafa's 21st and 22nd majors. He has coached at the summit. He knows the crushing weight, the family politics, and the insane expectations better than anyone. So, when a guy like Marc López opens his mouth about coaching bonds, you sit down and listen. During a sit-down with Clay, they grilled him about the Alcaraz-Ferrero wreckage, and his answer was raw, calculated, and deeply revealing about how messy this business gets. Now, I am rephrasing a bit to make sure the subtext lands, but López essentially warned us, we are never going to know the full story unless Carlos and Juan Carlos decide to spill the beans themselves. But then he dropped a fascinating little nugget of wisdom. He explicitly stated he does not buy the narrative that Alcaraz's dad pulled the trigger on firing Ferrero all by himself. Sure, that is an outsider looking in, but it is massive because it dismantles one of the biggest rumors out there. Let that sink in for a moment. The headline story in Spain was that Carlos Alcaraz, Sr., the boss of the Murcia Academy, was hungry for power and wanted Ferrero out of the way. We heard whispers about serious friction between Ferrero and the father regarding the blueprint of Carlos's career. Reports claimed they were butting heads on every management decision. People said they fought over turf, whether to train at Ferrero's base in Villena or the family setup in El Palmar. The media painted this ugly picture of a Game of Thrones power struggle between the coach and the bloodline. But López, who has navigated these minefields with other legends, is waving a red flag saying, pause. It is rarely that black and white. That distinction is crucial because in tennis, unlike a football team, the bond between player and coach is intensely intimate. Your coach isn't just fixing your forehand grip or tweaking your backhand slice. They are living out of a suitcase with you 40 weeks a year, sitting right there for the glory and the heartbreaking defeats. They are your therapist, your fitness drill sergeant, your scheduler, and the architect of your destiny. Honestly, it looks a lot less like a job and a lot more like a marriage. Marc López gets this on a spiritual level thanks to his years in the Rafa Nadal pressure cooker. Back when López hopped on board Team Nadal in December 2021, Rafa hit him with a cold truth on day one. Rafa looked him in the eye and said, I hired you to be my coach, not my buddy or my hitting partner. I need you to be brutally honest with me. That is the ruthless standard required to survive at the elite level. But maintaining that line is near impossible when you have decades of history, deep friendship, and real love in the mix. López hit the nail on the head regarding the inevitable expiration date on player-coach relationships. In the high-stakes world of pro tennis, 7 years isn't just a stint. It is practically a lifetime. Most elites swap mentors like socks, and even the legendary duos eventually hit a brick wall. Rafael Nadal and his uncle Tony were an inseparable force, grinding together from the time the boy was 3 until 2017. That is a legendary stint. Yet even they eventually had to sever their professional ties. Roger Federer shuffled his coaching deck multiple times, and Novak Djokovic has cycled through various mentors to stay at the top. It is simply the brutal heartbeat of this game. The split between Alcaraz and Ferrero feels like a lightning bolt because it struck right after a golden run 8 trophies in 2025, bagging both the French and US Opens. He wrapped up the season sitting on the throne as world number 1. Everything seemed flawless on the surface. However, Lopez offers a glimpse behind the curtain, proving that the highlight reels do not reveal the rot. Chemistry during a rally does not guarantee peace in the boardroom when contracts, family influence, and future strategies collide. Rumors swirling after the breakup suggest Ferrero was handed a strict 48-hour window to ink a new deal. 2 measly days to make a call that would define the next several years of his career. And when he balked at the fine print, the door slammed shut, no negotiation allowed, at least according to insiders speaking to Clay. Alcaraz, for his part, has played the diplomat perfectly in front of the microphones. Down at the Australian Open, he spun the narrative that it was a mutual parting of ways, claiming they turned the page as friends. Yet Ferrero's farewell message sang a different tune. "I would have loved to stay." Those are 2 clashing stories, and the actual truth is likely buried somewhere in the gray zone. Lopez also highlighted a fascinating plot twist involving Samuel Lopez, who came aboard as the deputy in December 2024. He had already stepped in for Alcaraz during tournaments in 2022 and 2023 when the head honcho was away. Flash forward just 12 months, and suddenly, the understudy is running the show. Marc López claimed Samuel brought a fresh spark that kept the team alive a bit longer, but it definitely triggers some suspicion, does it not? Was Samuel continually being prepped to take the throne? Was this changing of the guard orchestrated long before anyone confessed? Marc López's take on the Alcaraz-Ferrero dynamic really stuck with me. He labeled them an ideal pair, his exact phrasing, "a perfect match now lost." That is precisely why the tennis world is completely baffled. On paper and on the court, they appeared to be a match made in heaven. The stats are undeniable. Securing 6 majors before blowing out 23 candles is the stuff of legend. 2 Wimbledon crowns, a French title, and a United States Open victory, the synergy was palpable. You had Carlos's electric, infectious energy fused with Juan Carlos's tactical wisdom. It looked like a dynasty in the making for the next 10 years. Yet, Lopez warns that we are merely glancing at a carefully curated snapshot of their reality. We have no clue what transpired during those grueling practice sessions or the heated arguments over which events to prioritize. The tension regarding how much sway Carlos's family held over career moves remains a closed book. Nobody knows the gritty details of the contract wars or which specific demands finally broke the camel's back. Unless the duo decides to sit down and bare their souls, the full story will likely remain a mystery forever. Lopez, however, isn't just guessing. He possesses a rare perspective thanks to his deep ties with both camps. He and Ferrero go way back as fellow Spanish coaches navigating the absolute peak of the sport together. Furthermore, his roots in the tennis circuit have given him genuine access to the inner workings of the Alcaraz clan. The man literally stood shoulder to shoulder with Carlos for his final pro match at the 2022 Madrid Open, so he has witnessed the chemistry firsthand. One buzzing theory suggests that Carlos's Mi Camino mantra, his philosophy of carving his own path, was the real culprit. That my way approach to living and competing likely clashed violently with Ferrero's rigid, old-school discipline. Fernando Meligeni, a Brazilian veteran close to Ferrero, hinted that this mindset is about much more than just a young star wanting to have a good time. It strikes at the core of authority. Who holds the reins? How deep the family gets involved, the daily grind, and the player's thirst for freedom. Meligeni essentially implied that this ideological warfare was the true cause of the breakup. While Marc López didn't explicitly validate that rumor, his hesitation suggests the truth is a complicated puzzle with many missing pieces. It is rarely ever just a single smoking gun. We are likely looking at a complex cocktail of contract disputes, clashing philosophies, family politics, the inevitable friction of 7 years together, and perhaps simply diverging dreams for the next act of the young icon's career. What makes this truly fascinating is that Marc López is pivoting to the women's tour, committing to guide Marie Bouzkova for 15 weeks throughout the 2026 season. He cited his brief, disastrous stint with Jasmine Paolini last year as a cautionary tale, noting how that partnership imploded in merely 3 days. That is the brutal speed at which professional alliances can disintegrate at the elite level. You believe you are on solid ground, and then snap it is dead in the water. Lopez grasps this volatility better than most, and stepping back, this rupture casts a long, uncertain shadow over the future. Will the prodigy stick with Samuel Lopez solo, or will he eventually recruit another titan of the sport to sit in his box? Mats Wilander threw a curveball, suggesting he needs a legend like Roger Federer, someone with a completely fresh tactical playbook to challenge him. Brad Gilbert, meanwhile, tossed Carlos Moya's name into the ring as a viable contender. The rumor mill is even spinning with speculation, which Ferrero himself addressed about him possibly crossing lines to coach Jannik Sinner, the arch-rival. Ferrero played it cool, claiming now is not the moment to entertain such thoughts, yet he conspicuously avoided a hard no. However, the ticking clock points to one immediate crisis: his performance at the Australian Open. Melbourne is the final frontier he has yet to conquer. Seizing that title would make him the youngest man in the Open era to seal the career Grand Slam. The stakes are astronomical, yet he is walking into the fire without the mentor who engineered every single one of his prior major triumphs. That is a seismic psychological shift, regardless of his history with Samuel Lopez. When pressed on how this specific rupture might derail the Australian campaign, Marc López did not hold back. His answer was incredibly profound. He emphasized that it comes down to the human element, how the Spaniard has displayed freakish maturity for his age, and a knack for delivering when the lights are brightest. But Lopez also conceded that swapping generals is messy, that it can rattle a player in unforeseen ways, and that the truth remains hidden until the first ball is struck in anger. The grim reality is that he is staring down Jannik Sinner, a man who has owned the last 2 Australian Opens and is retooling his game specifically to neutralize Alcaraz. Sinner has been obsessively refining his net, approaches, and tweaking his serve mechanics. The rivalry between these two has evolved into something legendary. They have monopolized the last 8 Grand Slam titles and gone toe-to-toe in the last 3 major finals. Alcaraz drew blood at the US Open, but Sinner is relentlessly grinding to erase that deficit. So you have a coachless Alcaraz chasing his elusive title against a defending champion who has weaponized his game to exploit every crack in the Spaniard's armor. And this drama unfolds while the entire sport is still scratching its head over what actually triggered the divorce from Ferrero. It is hands down the most captivating narrative launching the 2026 season. What the Lopez interview really exposed is our blindness to the locker room reality. We witness the glorious match points, the fist pumps, the shiny hardware. We remain oblivious to the contract wars, the kitchen table debates, the grueling talks about destiny, and the personal friction that calcifies after years in the pressure cooker. Lopez has navigated those waters as both athlete and mentor, warning us to stay humble before pretending we know the full story from the outside. Notably, he refused to cast anyone as the villain in his commentary. He stayed neutral, avoiding the trap of reckless gossip. Instead, he reminded us that these alliances are labyrinths of complexity, often ending not with a bang, but simply because a natural expiration date arrives. Whether the exit strategy for Ferrero was handled clumsily is debatable, but Lopez insists we hold our fire until the fog clears. The burning question remains: what happens now? Can he conquer Australia with Samuel Lopez riding solo? Is a celebrity supercoach inevitable to complete the team? Or is a reunion with Ferrero written in the stars? Juan Carlos himself left that window cracked open. Given their shared history, slamming the door shut would be illogical. Perhaps this isn't the final curtain. It might just be the end of a chapter, with a sequel waiting to be written down the road. I just can't shake Marc Lopez's words, framing them as the ultimate dream team. But let's get real. If they were truly flawless, if the machinery was humming along, they wouldn't be history right now. Clearly, a vital piece of the puzzle was gone. It might have looked pristine from the stands, and perhaps that is the harsh lesson waiting for us. Just because you are crushing it on the court does not mean there isn't chaos behind the curtain. Hoisting Grand Slam trophies doesn't magically fix rifts over money, grueling drills, family interference, or where the ship is actually steering. As Alcaraz steps into the furnace of the Australian Open in the coming weeks, we will finally see if this shakeup fuels his fire or extinguishes it. Yet, the gritty details of why he and Ferrero imploded might remain locked away unless one of them decides to break the silence. And you know what? That might be fine. Some wars are meant to stay in the trenches, known only to the soldiers. Lopez certainly seems to respect that code. And considering he has walked the walk at the absolute peak of this game, we probably ought to heed his wisdom. So, here we stand. 1 month after the bombshell dropped, with Melbourne on the horizon, we are left staring at a mountain of question marks. But thanks to Lopez dropping some truth bombs, we grasp just how tangled these alliances get, and why even the mightiest dynasties eventually crumble. Whether Alcaraz pulled a genius move or made a fatal mistake, the clock is ticking on that verdict. But rest assured, the entire tennis universe will not blink for a second.